Today we are going to start a different text. We just finished up with Mississippi Trial 1955. And as we were talking about that, a lot of questions came about how did racism start, where did it come from, why was it a particular way in the South as opposed to the North, okay? So the thing that I decided to do was to find just a little bit of information about slavery. And so when we look at the context of slavery and how it was heavy in the South, it kind of helps you to get a better idea of why people felt the way they did in the South as opposed to the North, and maybe how some of those different feelings and sentiments got continued on throughout history, okay? So what I'm gonna do now is pass out your reading. And I want you to read this independently, and then we're gonna talk about it. The book that I used was a graphic novel, Harriet Tubman, an African-American abolitionist, and I wanted to use that text because it is nonfiction. We just finished reading Mississippi Trial 1955, which talked about the death and murder of Emmett Till, and I wanted to take them back a little further in history. Sometimes my students have a little bit of difficulty really imagining the time period, going back with the setting of different things. So sometimes they think of setting as just, oh, it was in a forest, or, you know, they were in the house. But really being able to understand the context of what that time period was. It's a good way to bring in nonfiction with the graphic novel. In Harriet Tubman's time. I had an individual reading with one student. The student that I sat with, he actually has a learning disability. So I wanted to sit with him to give him access to the text, independent of everyone reading on their own, so that he didn't feel like he had to struggle with the text. Take about 1 more minute to read independently, and then we're going to read it together. So you had a chance to read this on your own, and now we're going to reread it and see if there was anything that we missed. And when you give your responses, it has to be based on the text, on what this is saying. And I know we've been reading a lot of different things, so the task for today is to concentrate on this text only. Some words that might be unfamiliar to you. I only saw 2 that might be a little unfamiliar to you. The rest of the words, I think you can figure it out on your own. Peculiar, which means strange, and institution, any established law or custom. So those are the only 2 that I think you might need a little assistance with.
Harriet dedicated her life to fighting for freedom and justice. An active member of the Underground Railroad, she risked her life many times to help other runaway slaves. From Egypt to Canaan, the Bible tells how Moses led the Jews from slavery in Egypt to freedom. In Canaan, the promised land. For her work, Harriet was often called Moses of her people.
Not arrest a runaway slave could be fined $1,000. Anyone helping a slave could be fined $1,000 and face 6 months in prison.
The reading ability, the Lexile was 860, which falls within the grade band for the 4th and 5th grade. And I wanted to start there because it was, by this being the first day that they were reading it, give them something that wasn't as challenging but still fit into the requirements that they need for their age and grade level.
In Harriet Tubman's time, slavery was strong in the southern states of the United States. In the North, however, anti-slavery campaigns were winning supporters. A peculiar institution. From the 17th century, black people were brought by force from Africa to work as slaves in North America.
When you're reading nonfiction, it's important to read the captions. So many times people just read over that, but those captions help to tell you what's happening in the picture. I'm always trying to get them to pay attention to details within the text, pay attention to the words that the author uses, because those words mean something. Why would the author pick one word over the other? So trying to get them to think about the deeper meaning of the author's language in the text. I also, especially with nonfiction, having them to read everything, not just the title and the paragraph, but read the captions, look at the illustration, look at the photographs, what's happening there, why is that important? So trying to get them to really pay attention to those non-fiction text features. Okay, so we're gonna stop there, and I want you to pay attention to the numbers of the Confederate States and the Union States. And so, again, with reading your captions, that's gonna be very important because they're telling you additional information. You can't just skip over those. So what I want you to do now, with your tables, begin to answer some of those questions that are on your sheet. I will give you 15 minutes.
Yes.
What did the text say?
From how did they cross over?
No, her question was, if they crossed from Kentucky to go to Ohio, would they get in trouble?
No, because they was across the border and not across the border.
She's going back to the text. What is?
It said that any marshal who did not arrest a runaway slave could be fined $1,000.
Here it says over in one, it says to Mexico. So I think that they went to Mexico. That the slaves went to some slaves went to Mexico to be free.
It says right here on New Orleans, and it has this arrow going from right here, and then it's going from this way to Mexico, and it's pointing towards Mexico. So I agree with you on that one.
So if it says from Egypt to Canaan, are those the same places? With my class, I felt the need to really emphasize those words like besides and from and to, because sometimes they just, they want to just run and say, oh, I got it. I'm trying to help them to understand the key parts of the question that they need to really focus in on so that they will be able to answer the question successfully. And if you don't pay attention to the words besides or all of this except or not, those words make a difference. So let's look at number 1. First of all, this is the first page, number 4. Now, as I was going around, I saw a lot of people writing down Canada. Besides the North, what other directions did slaves flee to while traveling the Underground Railroad? So, excuse me, you have to pay attention to the words that are being used. If it says besides, that means something other than. Could a marshal be an African American person? So
Instead of being Caucasian.
what do you think a marshal is?
A leader, something like that.
Based on the text, what could a marshal be? Just anybody, Keelian?
Maybe someone who has to deal with who helps with the station. No. I think, at first I used to think they used to deal with the government, sort of.
Where's the text? So let's go back to the text to see what a marshal could be and what they did. So when we find out what a marshal does, that can tell us a little bit about who they are.
I think a marshal is almost like a policeman or something, because it said any that any marshal who did not arrest a runaway slave could be fined $1,000. And if a marshal arrests a runaway slave, that means they obviously are like a policeman or something.
Yes. So again, a marshal, based on what the text said, if they have the ability to arrest you, then they have to be somewhat like a government official, like Keelan said. They have some dealings with the government, or like a police officer. Okay? Before we go, we have just some last minute questions. While we were reading, Kayla wanted to know if this was a nonfiction text.
It says, on arrival, the slaves were sold at market to the highest bidder. Harriet Tubman's grandparents were probably captured. So if they said, that tells me probably, is that telling me, so if they saying like that's telling me like they was like, they don't know if they was or they wasn't. They could have just been born in slavery. They could have been captured or anything. And then the about, it was about. Oh, it's about in the comic when.
So on
she's out-
page 10.
Yeah, when she's outside, it says Harriet was about 5 when she was taken from her family. They saying she was about 5 when she was taken. She could have been 6. She could have been 5. She could have been 5 and a half. 6 and a
Okay,
half.
thank you, Kayla. Why would there not be a specific date? Because they're saying that she was born about 1820. We don't have an exact birth date. Right now, when you guys were born, we know the exact date, the time, the place, everything. Why is it that they're using that word about? And this is nonfiction. So why is it about?
They say about because slaves weren't able to read or write, and they weren't able to know like how old they were.
I love the question that Kayla asked on the side about if this is nonfiction, because we've been talking about realistic fiction, just the different genres of books, and we talk about nonfiction being factual. And so when she saw the words about and around, she had a question like, well, why isn't this solid if it's a fact? So I really appreciated that part. For homework tonight, you need to answer this prompt. Based on the text, explain the circumstances that existed that allow Harriet Tubman to become a leader. So we know that Harriet is very well known for her involvement with the Underground Railroad. And we know about leaders, what they do, what they represent. But certain things sometimes have to be in place for you to take that leadership role. So based on the conditions and the circumstances that you read about with what was going on during that time period, Jacoby, talk about how she was able to become a leader.